There's a secret buried in Geralt of Rivia's past, a wish spoken to a djinn that was never written down, never fully revealed. Even now, across books, games, and adaptations, no one knows exactly what he said in that moment when everything hung in the balance. But whatever those words were, they bound two souls together for over a century. They survived death itself, and they may be the reason the world didn't end in ice and darkness. This is the complete story of Geralt of Rivia, the White Wolf, the Butcher of Blaviken, the Witcher who never wanted to be a hero. A man created to feel nothing, who learned to love so deeply it nearly destroyed him. His tale spans lifetimes, crosses between worlds, and ends with a choice that determines the fate of reality itself. But here's what makes his story truly remarkable. Geralt was never supposed to survive past childhood. The mutations that made him a Witcher should have killed him. When they didn't, his masters subjected him to even more experiments, tests no other Witcher had endured. His white hair isn't just distinctive, it's a scar from the day he became something unique, something the world had never seen before. And decades later, when he finally died protecting others in a marketplace riot, that still wasn't the end. His story begins in the mountains, with a mother who made an impossible choice. Chapter 1. The Making of a Monster Hunter. The boy's mother left him in the snow, not out of cruelty, not out of abandonment, but because she knew something about her son that terrified her. He was destined for something she could not protect him from, something that required he become more than human, or less, depending on how you viewed witches. Her name was Vesemir, a sorceress and healer who traveled the continent tending to those in need. The child's father was, according to the fragmentary records we have, most likely a warrior named Corin. But what matters more than his parentage is what came next. Vesemir left her son in the mountains of Kaer, where the ancient Witcher stronghold of Kaer Morhen stood against the sky. Her reasons remain her own. She would appear again in Geralt's life much later, but would never fully explain why she gave him up. What we do know is this. An old Witcher named Vesemir found the boy and brought him to the keep. It was approximately 1160, and Kaer Morhen was no sanctuary. It was a forge where children were either tempered into weapons or broken entirely. At Kaer Morhen, children were not treasured for their innocence. They were raw material, potential witches who might survive the brutal training and mutations that would transform them into something other than human. The School of the Wolf was ancient even then, its traditions stretching back centuries. Young boys, most of them orphans or children given up by desperate families, were taken in and subjected to years of intensive training. They learned swordplay, alchemy, signs, magical gestures that could produce elemental effects, and monster lore. Every creature that stalked the dark places of the world had its weaknesses, and witches learned them all. But the training was only preparation. The true test, the one that separated those who would become witches from those who would die trying, was the trial of the grasses. The trial was an alchemical nightmare. Young boys, some no older than 10, were administered a series of mutagens, toxic substances derived from plants, minerals, and monster parts that would either kill them or fundamentally alter their bodies at a cellular level. Only 3 or 4 out of every 10 survived. The rest perished in agony as their bodies rejected the changes. Those who survived emerged transformed. Their eyes became cat-like, pupils able to dilate dramatically to see in near total darkness. Their reflexes sharpened to superhuman levels. They gained resistance to disease, poison, and the passage of time itself, aging far more slowly than ordinary humans. But they also became sterile, unable to father children. And they gained something else, a reputation that would follow them for the rest of their unnaturally long lives. The world feared witches almost as much as it needed them. But even among those who survived the trial of the grasses, the boy who would become Geralt was unusual. He displayed an extraordinary tolerance for the mutagens, a resilience that caught the attention of the mages who oversaw the trials. This was remarkable, unprecedented even. The mages saw an opportunity to push the boundaries of what they could create. They decided to experiment further. Additional mutagens were administered, experimental compounds that had never been tested on humans before. It was dangerous, potentially fatal. But the boy survived these additional trials as well. He survived what should have killed him. The cost was visible. His hair, originally dark, the exact color is never specified in the source material, though based on his mother's red hair and his father's blonde hair, we might infer it was something in between, turned completely white. His skin became pale as fresh snow. And though it's never explicitly proven in canon, many within the Witcher community believed these extra mutations granted him even greater speed, strength, and stamina than other Witchers possessed. He became something unique, a Witcher among Witchers, the only known survivor of the additional experimental mutagens, the White Wolf. Throughout his training, the boy was guided primarily by Vesemir, a Witcher who had already lived for centuries and had seen the School of the Wolf through its greatest triumphs and darkest hours. Vesemir became more than an instructor. He became a father figure, the only one this orphaned child would truly know. Under Vesemir's tutelage, the young Witcher learned not just how to fight, but how to think. Monsters, Vesemir taught him, were rarely just monsters. They had patterns, reasons for their behavior, weaknesses that could be exploited. A Witcher who understood why a monster killed could often find a way to stop it without unnecessary bloodshed. Sometimes the monster was the victim. Sometimes the real monster wore a human face. These lessons would shape the Witcher's approach to his work for decades to come. He also spent time at the Temple of Melitele in Elander, learning from Mother Yennefer, a priestess who would become one of the few people he could truly call a friend. From her, he learned that the world was more complex than the simple binary of monster and human. He learned compassion, though he would spend much of his life pretending he had none. Finally came the trial of the medallion, the final test before a young Witcher could set out on the path. The boy was sent to the Circle of Elements to retrieve his medallion, the wolf-shaped amulet that would identify him as a member of the School of the Wolf. The journey was treacherous, filled with dangers that could easily kill even a trained Witcher, including cave trolls that guarded the area. According to the accounts we have, he used the Axii sign, one of the magical gestures Witchers employ, to distract one cave troll while he slipped past its companions. He retrieved his medallion and returned to Kaer Morhen alive, proving himself worthy. Now came the time to choose a name. Young Witchers were encouraged to adopt surnames to make themselves seem more trustworthy to potential clients. People were more likely to hire a Witcher with a proper name than a nameless drifter who might disappear after taking payment. The young Witcher's first choice was elaborate and pretentious: Geralt Roger Eric du Haut Bellegarde. Vesemir laughed at the grandiose name and dismissed it as silly. Only Geralt remained. For a surname, the young Witcher chose of Rivia, suggesting he hailed from the kingdom of Lyria and Rivia. He even adopted a Rivian accent to make the deception more convincing. It was a practical choice, nothing more. A fiction designed to put nervous clients at ease. Ironically, and this is one of those delightful twists of fate, years later, Queen Meve of Lyria would knight him for his valor in the battle for the bridge on the Yaruga, officially granting him the title of Rivia. What began as a lie became truth. Geralt found this amusing, though he rarely showed it. With his training complete, His medallion earned and his name chosen, Geralt of Rivia set out into the world on horseback. He named his mare Roach, a name he would give to every horse he owned for the rest of his life, treating it as a single continuous relationship rather than a series of different animals. The path lay before him, a life of hunting monsters for coin, of traveling from village to town to city, never staying long enough to put down roots. It was the Witcher way. It was the only way he knew. But the boy who had survived the trials and emerged as Geralt of Rivia carried something with him beyond his swords and his training. He carried an idealism, a belief that he was needed in this world, that his work mattered, that he was protecting people who could not protect themselves. Vesemir had warned him not to play at being a knight-errant, not to involve himself in matters beyond hunting monsters. But Geralt was young, and he believed in right and wrong with the certainty that only youth provides. The world would teach him differently, the lessons would be painful, and they would begin in a town called Blaviken. Chapter 2. The Butcher's Mark. The life of a Witcher is one of constant motion. Geralt rode from contract to contract, following notices posted in town squares and taverns. "Witcher urgently needed," they would read, and Geralt would find himself descending into dungeons filled with bones, or tracking a creature through forests where sunlight feared to tread. He hunted manticores and wyverns, vampires and ghouls. Each monster had its weaknesses, its patterns, its reasons for killing. Some were simply predators following their nature. Others had been summoned or created by desperate or malevolent mages. And occasionally, the monster was a victim itself, cursed, transformed against its will. Geralt's reputation grew quickly. He was efficient, thorough, and remarkably effective even by Witcher standards. His white hair made him distinctive, memorable. People began to know him by sight before he even introduced himself. But reputation is a double-edged blade. The early years of Geralt's career were marked by a certain optimism, a conviction that his work served a noble purpose. He took contracts that seemed to require his intervention. He protected the innocent. He did what witches were created to do. Then came Blaviken, and everything changed. In the town of Blaviken, during the busiest market day, Geralt encountered a woman named Renfri. She was an exiled princess with a troubled past, pursued by a sorcerer named Stregobor. The sorcerer claimed she was born under the curse of the Black Sun, an eclipse that supposedly created girls who would grow into monsters in human form, driven by an instinct to kill. Stregobor had taken these girls, locked them in towers, experimented on them. Most had died. He called it protection. Renfri called it murder. She sought revenge. Her gang planned to attack the town, to force Stregobor to face her. Geralt tried to stop the bloodshed before it began. He warned Renfri. He went to Stregobor. Neither would back down. Geralt was forced to make a choice. He could walk away, let the violence unfold, or he could intervene, knowing that whatever he did would be seen as choosing a side. On the day of Blaviken's busiest market, Geralt made his choice. He confronted Renfri's gang in the town square and killed them all before they could slaughter innocent townsfolk. He moved with the precision and speed that made him a Witcher, his silver and steel blades finding their marks with terrible efficiency. 7 people died, Renfri among them. Geralt had prevented a massacre. He had saved lives. By any reasonable measure, he had done the right thing, but the people of Blaviken did not see it that way. They saw a mutant with white hair and yellow eyes standing among 7 corpses. They saw a Witcher who had killed humans, not monsters. The alderman, the man who might have defended Geralt's actions, instead ordered him out of the town. "We do not need your kind here, Butcher." Butcher. The name stuck. From that day forward, Geralt of Rivia would be known in many places as the Butcher of Blaviken, a monster hunter who killed humans. A reminder that witches, for all their utility, were dangerous and not to be trusted. The incident taught Geralt a fundamental truth about the world. There was no such thing as a lesser evil. Every choice carried consequences. Every action, no matter how well-intentioned, could become a source of regret. From that point forward, Geralt adopted a philosophy of neutrality. He would hunt monsters for coin. He would not involve himself in human conflicts. He would not choose sides. He would walk the path alone, taking the contracts that put food in his belly and coin in his purse. But the world, as Geralt would discover again and again, does not respect neutrality. It was during these years of wandering that Geralt met Dandelion, or Jaskier, as he was known in some lands. A bard, a troublemaker, a man with more charisma than common sense. Dandelion had a gift for getting into situations that required rescuing, and an even greater gift for turning Geralt's adventures into songs that spread across the continent. "Toss a coin to your witcher," the refrain would go, and suddenly people who had never seen Geralt knew his name. The songs romanticized his exploits, turned him into a hero when he considered himself nothing more than a professional doing a job. But Dandelion became Geralt's closest friend, though Geralt would rarely admit it. The bard traveled with him, chronicled his adventures, and provided a connection to the human world that Geralt otherwise lacked. Through Dandelion, Geralt remained tethered to humanity, even as his mutations and reputation set him apart. The bard would also prove instrumental in another way. It was Dandelion's foolish interference with a djinn that would lead Geralt to the most important relationship of his life. Geralt did not believe in destiny. He thought it was a convenient fiction, a story people told themselves to avoid responsibility for their choices. When someone spoke of fate or destiny, Geralt would shake his head. He would learn otherwise, and the lesson would begin with a fishing trip gone catastrophically wrong. Chapter 3. Bound by Fate. The Djinn's Wish. The day Geralt's life changed forever began like so many others. With Dandelion making a terrible decision, they were fishing on the Pontar River, taking a rare moment of leisure between contracts. Geralt's line caught something heavy, and when they reeled it in, they found not a fish, but an ancient sealed amphora, a stoneware jar that hummed with barely contained power. Dandelion recognized it immediately. A djinn, a creature of tremendous magical power, bound within the vessel until someone opened it and claimed the traditional 3 wishes. Geralt warned him against opening it. Djinns were capricious, dangerous, known for twisting wishes into nightmares. But Dandelion, being Dandelion, ignored the warning. The seal broke. Red mist poured from the amphora, coalescing into a being of smoke and fury. Dandelion, delighted rather than terrified, began making wishes immediately. The djinn responded by wrapping invisible fingers around the bard's throat, crushing his larynx. Dandelion collapsed, blood pouring from his mouth, unable even to scream. Geralt acted quickly, using an exorcism taught to him by a priestess at the Temple of Melitele. The djinn retreated back into the spiritual realm. But the damage was done. Dandelion was dying, his voice, the instrument of his livelihood, his identity, destroyed. They rode for the nearest city, Rinda, but arrived after nightfall when the gates were closed. While waiting with other travelers, an elf named Ciri mentioned that a sorceress had recently taken up residence in town. If anyone could heal Dandelion, it would be her. Her name was Yennefer of Vengerberg. When Geralt finally gained entry to the merchant's house where she was staying, he found a woman unlike anyone he had encountered. Beautiful, yes? All sorceresses used magic to reshape their bodies to perfection. But there was something more. An intensity. An intelligence that assessed him in seconds and found him interesting. Yennefer agreed to heal Dandelion, but she had her own agenda. She wanted to capture the djinn for herself. Sorceresses could draw immense power from bound djinns, enough to make them virtually omnipotent. All she needed was for Dandelion to make his final wish, freeing the djinn from its current master so she could claim it. There was only one problem. Dandelion had never actually been granted any wishes. The djinn had attacked him before he could finish speaking. Geralt was the one who had stopped the djinn. Geralt was the one who held its seal. Geralt was the djinn's master, not Dandelion. And he still had all three wishes. When Yennefer discovered this, she used her magic to charm Geralt, compelling him to protect her from the town's authorities who wanted her gone from Rinda. Under her spell, Geralt defeated the guards and created enough chaos to give Yennefer the time she needed. But when the time came to actually trap the djinn, everything went catastrophically wrong. Yennefer attempted to bind the creature using all the power at her disposal. The djinn resisted with fury, and their struggle began to tear Rinda apart. Buildings exploded. People fled screaming. The djinn was too powerful, too angry, and Yennefer was beginning to lose. Geralt arrived just as the djinn was about to kill her. He fought the sorceress, trying to make her understand that she would die if she continued. But Yennefer was too determined, or too proud, to stop. Finally, exhausted and desperate, she told Geralt the truth. He needed to make his last wish to free the djinn. Once the djinn was no longer bound to Geralt, Yennefer could trap it herself. But Geralt saw what she could not. The moment he made his wish and the djinn was freed, it would kill her in revenge for her attempt to enslave it. She was exhausted, her magic nearly depleted. She would not survive. In that moment, Geralt made a choice that would echo across the rest of his life. He made his final wish. The exact words were never recorded. In the original books by Andrzej Sapkowski, Yennefer hears the wish and is astounded by it, but the specific wording is left to the reader's imagination. What we know from the story's context is this: Geralt wished for something that would both free the djinn and prevent it from killing Yennefer. Based on what a priest suggests in the story, and what we see of the consequences throughout Geralt and Yennefer's relationship, the most commonly accepted interpretation is that Geralt wished to bind his fate to hers. Since djinns cannot kill their masters, current or former, if Yennefer's fate was tied to Geralt's, the djinn would be unable to harm her without harming him. The creature had no choice but to flee, returning to its realm and leaving both witcher and sorceress alive in the rubble of what had been a street in Rinda. Yennefer understood what Geralt had done. She was awed by it, angry at the presumption, grateful for the sacrifice, and perhaps in that moment, something more. They kissed, and then they made love amid the destruction, beginning a relationship that would define both their lives. But there's a twist buried in this seemingly romantic moment, a question that would haunt them both for decades. Did Yennefer love Geralt because of genuine feeling, or because his wish had bound them together magically? This uncertainty, this inability to know if her feelings were her own or manufactured by djinn magic, would drive a wedge between them. Because Yennefer of Vengerberg, who had spent her entire life fighting for agency and control over her own destiny, could not accept the possibility that her love was not her choice. Geralt and Yennefer spent the next half-year together in Vengerberg, Yennefer's home city. It was intense, passionate, and often difficult. They were drawn to each other with a force that seemed to go beyond simple attraction. But was it the wish, or was it real? Neither could say with certainty. Eventually, Geralt chose to leave. He did it in the coward's way, slipping out during the night, leaving only a rose and a letter on the Tarta bed. It was easier than facing Yennefer's anger, or worse, her hurt. For the next several years, Geralt and Yennefer maintained an on-again, off-again relationship. They would reunite, fall back into each other's arms with the same intensity as their first meeting. They would fight, sometimes literally. They would separate, each returning to their own lives. And then fate, or the djinn's magic, would bring them back together again. The question remained unanswered, and it would stay unanswered for a long time. But there's a second part to this story, a quest that happens much later in Geralt's life, where Yennefer finally gets her answer. We'll return to that moment when we reach it. For now, all you need to know is this: the djinn's wish bound them together. But what happened next would prove whether that bond was prison or paradise. Before that reunion could happen, though, Geralt's life would take another turn. Destiny, that force he claimed not to believe in, had another gift to give him. Her name was Cirilla, and she would change everything. Chapter 4. A Child of Destiny. The law of surprise is an ancient custom, older than any kingdom on the continent. It states that a person whose life has been saved may repay their savior with that which you already have, but do not yet know. The law is a gamble for both parties. The payment could be as simple as a litter of puppies or as significant as an unborn child. When Geralt invoked the law of surprise, he did not expect to receive anything of value. He certainly did not expect to receive a child. It happened in the kingdom of Cintra, at the court of Queen Calanthe. A masked knight named Duny had appeared at a feast, claiming the right to marry the queen's daughter, Princess Pavetta, by virtue of the law of surprise. Years earlier, Duny had saved King Rognar's life, and the king had offered him the traditional payment. The problem was that Duny was cursed. By day, he was transformed into a creature resembling a hedgehog. Only at night did he assume human form. Queen Calanthe was horrified at the idea of her daughter marrying such a creature, and planned to have him killed despite the law. Geralt intervened. He didn't believe strongly in the law of surprise itself. It smacked too much of the destiny he'd been trying to avoid. But he recognized that something larger was at work here. Pavetta and Duny were clearly in love, meeting in secret despite her mother's wishes. And when Calanthe attempted to have Duny murdered, Pavetta's latent magical powers erupted with devastating force, nearly destroying the banquet hall and everyone in it. Geralt talked Calanthe down from her fury. The curse on Duny was broken when Pavetta accepted him. The young couple was allowed to marry, and Duny, grateful for Geralt's intervention, offered him anything he wished as payment. Geralt was reluctant to ask for anything. He had not saved Duny for payment, but Duny insisted. And finally, more. In jest than in earnest, or perhaps testing whether destiny was real after all, Geralt invoked the law of surprise himself. Give me that which you already have, but do not yet know. Pavetta immediately vomited. Morning sickness. She was pregnant, and the child she carried was now promised to Geralt by the law of surprise. Geralt was horrified. He did not want a child. He had no idea what he would do with one. Witches didn't have families. He told Mousesack, Queen Calanthe's advisor and a druid, that he had no intention of claiming the child. But Mousesack warned him, "You cannot escape destiny." The child and Geralt were now bound together by forces larger than either of them. Geralt left Cintra that night, determined to avoid the place and never return. If he stayed away from the child, perhaps the law of surprise would not take effect. Perhaps he could avoid this particular twist of fate. He was wrong. 6 years later, Geralt found himself in the forest of Brokilon, a dangerous place where dryads ruled and humans rarely entered safely. There he encountered a young girl, barely more than a child, with ash-blonde hair and striking green eyes. Her name was Cirilla, called Ciri, Princess of Cintra, granddaughter of Queen Calanthe. and Geralt's child of surprise. Ciri had run away from the castle, trying to escape the stifling world of royal expectations. She was drawn to Brokilon by something she could not name, perhaps the same destiny that had bound her to Geralt. They spent only a brief time together, but it was enough for Geralt to see that Ciri was no ordinary child. There was something special about her, something powerful. The Dryads felt it too, and wanted to keep her in Brokilon, to make her one of their own. Geralt managed to get Ciri out of the forest and returned her to Mousasak's care. Then he left. Again. Still refusing to claim his child of surprise. Still believing he could outrun destiny if he just kept moving. But here's the reveal. Geralt wasn't running from the child. He was running from the responsibility. From the fear that he, a mutant designed to kill monsters, could never be the father a child deserved. Years passed. Geralt tried not to think about the girl he had abandoned twice now. But something began to change in him. Perhaps it was Yennefer's influence. She desperately wanted a child. But like all sorceresses, she was barren, a cost of the magical transformations that had made her beautiful. Ciri could be the daughter neither of them could have any other way. Or perhaps it was simply time. Geralt was growing older, even by Witcher standards. The path was lonely. The idea of having someone to care for, someone to train and teach, began to appeal to him. Whatever the reason, Geralt finally decided to embrace his destiny and claim Ciri as his child of surprise. He began traveling toward Cintra, planning to take her away and train her. But when he reached Cintra, he found the city in ruins. Nilfgaard, the empire from the south, had invaded the northern kingdoms. Cintra was one of the first kingdoms to fall. Queen Calanthe was dead. She had thrown herself from the castle walls rather than surrender. Pavetta and Duni had died years earlier in a mysterious shipwreck. And Ciri was presumed dead as well, lost in the massacre. Geralt, devastated, turned away from Cintra. He had waited too long. He had denied destiny too many times, and now the child he was meant to protect was gone. But Ciri was not dead. She had escaped through a combination of luck, determination, and something more. A power that manifested when she screamed. A power that had also appeared when her mother screamed at the banquet all those years ago. Ciri fled into the countryside, alone and terrified. Through circumstances that seemed like coincidence but were almost certainly destiny at work, she ended up in the care of a merchant named Jurga. Geralt, wounded and delirious after fighting monsters to save Jurga's life, was brought to the merchant's home to recover. When Geralt finally woke, he found Ciri there, waiting for him. She ran to him, calling him her destiny, and Geralt, finally accepting what he could not change, embraced her. "You're more than that, Ciri," he told her. "Much more." From that moment on, Cirilla Fiona Ellen Rhiannon became Geralt of Rivia's daughter in every way that mattered. He took her to Kaer Morhen, to the place where he had been trained as a child. And there, with Yennefer's help and Vesemir's guidance, he began to train her. Ciri could not undergo the trial of the grasses. The mutations were deadly enough for boys. No one knew if a girl could survive them. But she could learn everything else. Swordplay, signs, alchemy, monster lore. She could become a witcher in all but name. But there was something more to Ciri, something that explained why so many powerful forces wanted her. She carried the Elder Blood, a genetic legacy from the elven sorceress Lara Doran that granted its bearers incredible power, including the ability to travel between worlds and through time. This power would make her the most sought-after person on the continent, and it would lead to events that would separate Geralt and Ciri for years, setting them both on paths that would eventually converge in a battle that would determine the fate of all worlds. But before that separation, they had a few precious years together at Kaer Morhen. Years that Geralt would look back on as the happiest of his long life, because for a little while, he had a family. Chapter 5. The Search and the Sacrifice. The years after Ciri entered Geralt's life were marked by constant danger and the growing realization that the girl carried more power than anyone had initially understood. Her bloodline made her the most valuable prize on the continent. Winters at Kaer Morhen were particularly meaningful. There, isolated from the outside world, Ciri trained with Geralt, Vesemir, and the other witches, Lambert and Eskel, Geralt's brothers in all but blood. Yennefer would visit, teaching Ciri magic and treating her as the daughter she could never have biologically. These were perhaps the happiest years of Geralt's long life. He had a family. He had purpose beyond simply hunting monsters for coin. He had something worth protecting. But the outside world does not forget valuable things. The Thaned coup was the turning point. Mages had gathered on the island for a grand conclave, supposedly to discuss policy and magical research. In truth, various factions were maneuvering for power, with some supporting Nilfgaard and others supporting the northern kingdoms. The coup erupted with sudden violence. In the chaos, Geralt fought to protect Ciri, but in the end, Ciri was pursued by too many forces at once. She fled through a portal, using her elder blood to escape. Geralt tried to follow, but was confronted by Vilgefortz, a sorcerer of immense power working secretly with Nilfgaard. Vilgefortz nearly killed Geralt, shattering his legs with magical force. Only the intervention of Triss Merigold saved his life. For months, Geralt recuperated, and while he healed, Ciri was lost somewhere in the wider world, hunted by forces that wanted to use her power. When Geralt was finally able to walk again, to fight again, he did the only thing he could. He began searching for Ciri. He formed a company of companions, a Hansa. Dandelion joined him, as always. Milva, an archer of extraordinary skill. Regis, a higher vampire who looked human. Later, Angoulême and Kaer joined as well. They traveled across the war-torn continent, following leads that often led nowhere. And slowly, piece by piece, they discovered the truth about what had happened to Ciri after Thaned. The truth was worse than Geralt had feared. Ciri had suffered. She had been captured. She had killed in arenas for entertainment. By the time they found solid information about her location, she had been captured by Vilgefortz and taken to his stronghold at Stygia Castle. The assault on Stygia was desperate and costly. Kaer died in the fighting. Regis sacrificed himself to save Geralt. But in the final confrontation, with Yennefer's help, Geralt managed to kill Vilgefortz. They found Ciri alive, traumatized, changed by her experiences, but alive. The reunion was tearful and joyous. Against all odds, they had found each other again. But the story of the books doesn't end happily. It ends in a marketplace in Rivia, where Geralt went to live under the name he had chosen all those years ago. Chapter 6. Death and Rebirth. The Rivian pogrom began with something small, an argument between a human merchant and some dwarves in the marketplace, the kind of petty dispute that normally would have been forgotten within an hour. But tensions were high after the war. Humans blamed non-humans for supporting Nilfgaard. Non-humans blamed humans for centuries of persecution. Within minutes, the disagreement erupted into violence. Humans attacked dwarves and elves in the marketplace. More people joined the chaos, taking out old grievances on anyone who looked different. 184 non-humans would die that day, according to the book account. Geralt tried to stop it. He drew his sword and waded into the mob, trying to create a space where reason might prevail. For a few moments, it seemed to work. Then a young man named Rob, barely more than a boy, drove a pitchfork into Geralt's chest. The wound was mortal. Geralt collapsed in the street, blood pouring from the wound, his legendary career ending in a dirty marketplace at the hands of a frightened peasant. Yennefer rushed to his side. She tried everything, every spell, every technique. She poured all her power into trying to save him, refusing to accept that he was dying. Finally, drained beyond her limits, Yennefer collapsed beside him. Then Ciri arrived. She found Geralt and Yennefer lying in the street, both dying or dead. And Ciri, the girl with elder blood running through her veins, decided she would not accept this ending. She carried both Geralt and Yennefer onto a boat. As she pushed away from shore, something impossible happened. The lake transformed, becoming a gateway. A white unicorn appeared. Ihwarakwax, a creature from another world who had helped Ciri before. Light enveloped the boat, and it arrived at a place called the Isle of Avalon, or Malus Island, or the Isle of Avalach, a place that existed outside of normal time and space. There, Geralt and Yennefer woke. The ending of Andrzej Sapkowski's saga is deliberately ambiguous. Some interpret the Isle of Avalon as simply a poetic representation of the afterlife. Geralt and Yennefer died in Rivia, and this is their peace. Others believe they truly were transported to another realm, saved by Ciri's power, allowed to live out their days together far from the cruelties of the mortal world. The text supports both interpretations. Geralt wakes with bandages on his wounds. Dead men do not need bandages, as one analysis notes. But the ethereal, timeless quality of the Isle suggests something beyond normal existence. What we know for certain is that Ciri left them there. She had saved them, or given them peace, and then returned to her own world. But the story does not end there. Because while Geralt and Yennefer rested on their mysterious island, the world continued to turn. The Wild Hunt arrived. They were not the spectral wraiths of legend. They were NL, elves from another world who rode between dimensions. And they wanted Ciri. When they could not find her, they took Yennefer instead. Geralt pursued them. He crossed between worlds, tracking the hunt with determination that bordered on obsession. He discovered they could be killed. They were flesh and blood, not spirits. But he was outnumbered. Eventually, the hunt captured him as well. Their leader, Eredin, offered Geralt a bargain. Ride with the hunt, serve them for a time, and Yennefer would be released. Geralt agreed. What choice did he have? For years, though time meant little in the worlds between worlds, Geralt rode with the Wild Hunt. He was a prisoner, not a willing ally, and he waited for his chance to escape. That chance came eventually. Geralt broke free from the hunt and returned to his own world. But the journey took its toll. When Geralt reappeared near Kaer Morhen, he was wounded, pursued, and suffering from complete amnesia. He could not remember who he was, where he came from, or anything of his past. The legendary witcher Geralt of Rivia had returned to the world. But the man wearing his face had no idea who he was supposed to be. This is where the video games begin. And this is where Geralt's story takes a new turn. Chapter 7. Memory lost. Path found. The attack on Kaer Morhen came without warning. Bandits and mages stormed the fortress, seeking the witcher's secrets, the alchemical formulae that allowed the School of the Wolf to create new witches. They killed Leo, one of the youngest witches. They fought their way deep into the fortress before the defenders could mount an effective response. Geralt fought alongside Vesemir and the others, but his amnesia handicapped him. He could still fight, muscle memory ensured that, but he had no context for what was happening or why. The attackers called themselves Salamandra. They were creating their own mutants, mockeries of witches. Geralt pursued them to recover what they had stolen and to exact revenge for Leo's death. The journey would take him to Vesemir, where he would encounter King Foltest and become entangled in the politics he had always tried to avoid. Throughout the investigation, Geralt had visions and flashbacks, fragmentary memories that suggested he had lived through events far more significant than anything he was experiencing now. He saw a young girl with ash-blonde hair. He saw a sorceress whose face he could not quite recall. But the memories remained frustratingly out of reach. He met Triss Merigold, a sorceress who tried to help him remember. Without his memories of Yennefer or anyone else, Geralt became romantically involved with Triss. This relationship would have consequences later, but for now, with his memories gone, it felt real. Eventually, Geralt tracked Salamandra's leaders and defeated them. But his story was far from over. King Foltest requested Geralt's presence, offering him protection and employment. Political tensions were rising across the northern kingdoms. The assassination came during a siege. King Foltest was attempting to reclaim La Valette Castle. Geralt accompanied him as a bodyguard. They breached the castle. They fought through defenders. They reached the inner sanctum. And there, a witcher appeared from the shadows and killed King Foltest with a single blade thrust. Geralt, covered in the king's blood and standing over his body, was immediately accused of the murder. The Kingslayer, they called him. It did not matter that Geralt was innocent. All anyone saw was a witcher standing over a dead king. Without his memories, Geralt had no way to prove his innocence or to understand why someone wanted Foltest dead. But Vernon Roche saw the truth, and together they would hunt for the real King Slayer. Chapter 8. The Kingslayer's Shadow. Vernon Roche saved Geralt's life, freeing him from the dungeons and fleeing north with him. Their goal was simple: find the real Kingslayer and clear Geralt's name. The trail led them to Flotsam, a rough border town where criminals and soldiers all rubbed shoulders. There they found Dandelion and Zoltan Chive, Geralt's old companions. For Geralt, seeing Dandelion triggered memories. Fragmentary, incomplete, but memories nonetheless. They also encountered Iorveth, a Scoia'tael commander, scarred and bitter. He was connected to the Kingslayer, though his exact role remained unclear. Geralt faced a choice: ally with Roche and the human authorities, or ally with Iorveth and the non-humans. The choice would define the rest of the investigation. The trail eventually led to Loch Muin, where rulers of the northern kingdoms had gathered. There, Geralt learned the truth about the Kingslayer. His name was Letho of Gulet, a witcher of the School of the Viper. He had assassinated multiple kings, destabilizing the northern kingdoms in preparation for a new Nilfgaardian invasion. He had been hired by Emperor Emhyr var Emreis himself. But Letho had also been used, betrayed by those who hired him. When Geralt finally confronted Letho, he made a choice that defined who he was at his core. He chose mercy. He let Letho live. Throughout these events, Geralt's memories continued to return. He remembered Yennefer, not just as a name, but as a person he had loved. The sorceress with violet eyes who had been his partner for decades. He remembered Ciri more clearly, the daughter he had trained and protected. The amnesia was lifting. Geralt of Rivia was becoming himself again. But the return of his memories came with a price. He realized that his relationship with Triss, while genuine in some ways, was not what he truly wanted. And he realized something else. Ciri was in danger. Somewhere. From something. The Wild Hunt was after her again. And this time, they would not stop until they had her. Chapter 9. The Wild Hunt rises. The dream always began the same way. Geralt stood in Kaer Morhen in summer. Ciri was there, young and laughing. Yennefer watched with pride. Then the dream would shatter, and Geralt would wake, knowing that something was terribly wrong. The Wild Hunt was after Ciri, and Geralt's search for her would take him across the war-torn continent. He began in White Orchard, a region devastated by war. He was joined by Vesemir, who had left Kaer Morhen to help in the search. Their investigation led them to Emperor Emhyr var Emreis, who was revealed to be Duni, Ciri's father. The Emperor made Geralt an offer: find Ciri and bring her back safely. Geralt learned that Ciri had been seen in Velen, fleeing desperately from the wild hunt. While searching, Geralt reconnected with old allies. He found Triss in Novigrad, helping mages escape persecution. He found Yennefer, who had been searching for Ciri as well, using her connections with the Lodge of Sorceresses. Their reunion was complicated. Yennefer knew about Triss. She was hurt and angry, but finding Ciri mattered more than their personal issues. Together they traveled to Skellige. There, among the harsh islands, they found more evidence of Ciri's flight. The trail led them eventually to the Isle of Mists, a place shrouded in magic. On the isle, hidden within a cabin surrounded by protective spells, Geralt finally found Ciri. She was unconscious, her powers drained from constant use. But she was alive. The reunion was tearful and joyous. Against all odds, the family was together again. But their reunion could not last. The wild hunt attacked almost immediately. Ciri used her last strength to teleport herself and Geralt to Kaer Morhen. It was the only place she could think of, the only refuge she remembered. And immediately, Geralt knew what had to be done. The wild hunt would follow. They had minutes before the hunt descended on Kaer Morhen in force. Geralt had spent weeks gathering allies. Now he called them all to Kaer Morhen. If the player has completed the right quests and made the right choices, Geralt can assemble a formidable group. Triss, Yennefer, Zoltan, Vernon Rocher, Keira Metz, Hjalmar an Crate, and even Letho, if Geralt had spared him. They gathered in Kaer Morhen's Great Hall and made their plans. They had defensive positions, traps, choke points, and they had something the Wild Hunt did not: desperation and love. As they finished their preparations, snow began to fall. The temperature dropped unnaturally fast. The Wild Hunt had arrived, and the Battle of Kaer Morhen was about to begin. Chapter 10. The Battle of Kaer Morhen. The sky above Kaer Morhen turned black. Lightning crackled, but it was cold lightning, ice rather than fire. From dark clouds, riders descended, skeletal horses with glowing eyes, warriors in ancient armor carved from ice. At their head rode Eredin Breac Glass, the king of the Wild Hunt. The battle began with portals opening in the forest. Hunt warriors poured through. Geralt, Lambert, and potentially Letho slipped out under an invisibility spell, using dimeritium bombs to close the portals before too many warriors could enter. They succeeded, but the Hunt warriors noticed them. The fighting grew intense with each portal they closed. Inside Kaer Morhen, Ciri could not simply hide. When she saw Hunt warriors breaching the walls, when she saw Triss in danger, she grabbed her sword and entered the battle. Ciri fought with skills that rivaled any soldier. She had the Elder Blood, the power to blink, teleporting short distances in combat, appearing behind enemies, striking from impossible angles. For a moment, the defenders felt hope. Then Carantha, one of the Hunt's generals, arrived, a mage of terrible power. Where he went, cold followed. The defenders fell back, fighting every step. They retreated through gates, fought in the courtyard. And then Eredin himself entered the battle, along with Imlerith, the Hunt's brutal general. Vesemir saw what was happening. He saw Ciri surrounded, saw Eredin moving toward her. And the old Witcher made his choice. He threw himself between Ciri and Imlerith. The Hunt general grabbed Vesemir by the throat and lifted him off the ground. With casual brutality, Imlerith broke Vesemir's neck. Geralt screamed. He tried to reach Vesemir, but he was too far away. Too slow. Vesemir died with his eyes on Ciri, his last act protecting the girl he had helped train. And something in Ciri broke. Power exploded from her in a shockwave that leveled everything around her. Hunt warriors were flung away. The ground cracked. When the blast subsided, bodies lay everywhere. Ciri stood in the center, sobbing, her power spent. Eredin saw that his warriors were broken. He made the tactical decision to retreat. They had won. Technically, but Vesemir was dead. Others had fallen as well. That evening they held a funeral. Each person who had known Vesemir spoke of what he had meant to them. Geralt told Ciri that Vesemir's death was not her fault, that he had chosen to protect her because she mattered more than his own life. But grief does not listen to logic. Ciri would carry the weight of Vesemir's death for the rest of her life. The next morning, Avallac'h arrived with a plan. But his plan required Ciri to face the White Frost, the apocalyptic force that threatened to freeze all worlds. If Ciri faced the White Frost, she might not survive. But if she did not, the Wild Hunt would never stop hunting her. The choice was Ciri's to make, and Geralt's role was to prepare her for whatever she decided. Chapter 11. Confronting the White Frost. In the aftermath of the battle, choices had to be made. Difficult choices that would determine not just Ciri's fate, but the fate of the world. Ciri wanted revenge. She wanted to find Imlerith and make him suffer. Geralt understood that need. He felt it himself. But he also knew that revenge could consume a person. In Velen, they found Imlerith conducting a ritual. Ciri confronted him, and Geralt fought beside her. Together, they brought Imlerith down. But the revenge did not heal Ciri. It never does. They tracked Caranther to Undvik, and killed him as well. That left only Eredin, and he was not waiting for them. But first, there were complications. The Lodge of Sorceresses wanted to use Ciri for their own purposes. Philippa Eilhart requested a meeting. This turn, player as Geralt must decide. Let Ciri go alone or go with her. This choice affects how Ciri sees herself, as a child who needs protection, or as a young woman capable of handling difficult situations. There was also the matter of Skjal, a young man from Skellige who had helped Ciri, but was branded a coward because villagers didn't understand what he'd done. Ciri felt guilt over this. Geralt could help her visit Skjal's grave and confront the villagers, showing that he valued her feelings and her need for closure, or he could dismiss it as unimportant. And then there was Avallac'h's laboratory. Ciri discovered evidence that the elf had been studying her, perhaps planning to use her as the Wild Hunt intended. She was furious and wanted to destroy everything in his lab. Geralt could let her do it, allowing her to express her anger and take control. Or he could tell her to calm down and stay focused. Each of these choices seemed small in the moment, but they added up. They created a pattern that Ciri internalized. Did Geralt trust her? Did he believe in her ability to make decisions? Did he treat her as a child to be protected, or as a young woman preparing to face the most important challenge of her life? The answers would determine everything. When they finally confronted Eredin, they met him on a frozen battlefield. The final battle was everything the previous fights had prepared them for. When Eredin finally fell, dying on the frozen ground, he laughed. "You think you've won? The White Frost is coming. It will consume your world as it consumed mine. And she is the only one who can stop it if she's strong enough." The Wild Hunt had not been pursuing Ciri out of simple malice. They had been fleeing the White Frost, an apocalyptic force that froze entire worlds. And they believed Ciri's elder blood could save them, or at least give them a new world to flee to. But Ciri was not going to save the Hunt. She was going to face the White Frost directly. Avallac'h explained what had to be done. A conjunction of spheres was beginning. During it, Ciri could use her powers to enter the source of the White Frost and potentially stop it. But it was dangerous, possibly fatal, and whether she felt strong enough to attempt it depended entirely on the choices Geralt had made. Had he shown confidence in her? Had he treated her as capable? If he had made at least 3 positive choices in his interactions with her, then Ciri went into the portal believing in herself. If he had not, then Ciri went doubting herself. And doubt, in such circumstances, could be fatal. Geralt stood outside the elven tower on Undvik and watched Ciri walk into the portal. He did not know if he would ever see her again. All he could do was wait, and hope that he had been the father she needed him to be. Chapter 12. A Witcher's Legacy. The world did not end when Ciri entered the portal, but for Geralt, the waiting was unbearable. Days passed. He returned to Kaer Morhen and found the fortress empty. His allies had gone their separate ways. Then, finally, word came. The nature of that word depended on what had happened in the portal. There were 3 possible endings. The Witcher ending. In this version, Ciri survived the White Frost, but when Emperor Emhyr offered her the throne, she refused. She wanted to be a Witcher. Geralt met her at an inn in White Orchard. She came in smiling, and they embraced with the joy of people who had feared they might never see each other again. Geralt had brought her a gift, a sword, specially crafted, made for a Witcher. On the crossguard was inscribed Zirael, the Swallow, her name. They talked about the future. Ciri wanted to take contracts, to travel the world as Geralt had done. She would make her own way. They left together, father and daughter, both Witchers. This was the life Ciri had chosen. Freedom, adventure, purpose. Not the destiny others had tried to force on her, but the one she chose for herself. The Empress ending. In this version, Ciri also survived, but she chose to accept her father's offer. She would become Empress, putting duty above personal desire. If Geralt had taken Ciri to see Emhyr earlier in the game, if he had not shielded her from that decision, then this ending becomes possible. The farewell was tearful. Ciri and Geralt both knew this meant they would rarely see each other. But before she left, Ciri told Geralt she would be a good Empress. She would remember everything he taught her. Geralt returned to the path alone. His daughter lived, but she was lost to him in a different way. She belonged to the world now. The tragic ending. In this version, Ciri's doubts overwhelmed her strength. She entered the portal to face the White Frost, and she did not return. Geralt went to see Emperor Emhyr and told him his daughter was dead. She had sacrificed herself to stop the White Frost. He traveled to Crookback Bog, where he had learned that one of the crones had taken Ciri's Witcher medallion as a trophy. Geralt hunted the crone down. The fight was brutal. He was wounded multiple times, but he refused to die before retrieving Ciri's medallion. Finally, the crone fell. Geralt took the medallion and held it close. It was all he had left. He sat in the swamp, exhausted, wounded, alone. More monsters began to approach. Geralt looked up at them and did not reach for his sword. He simply sat there, holding Ciri's medallion, as the creatures closed in. The screen faded to black. His fate was left unclear, but the implication was unavoidable. But there's one more story to tell, one that brings us back to that djinn, and to the question that haunted Geralt and Yennefer for decades. The last wish, resolved. In The Witcher 3, during the quest, The Last Wish, Yennefer asks Geralt to help her find another djinn. She claims she wants to harness its power, but that's not the truth. She wants the djinn to break the spell that binds her and Geralt together. Yennefer wants to see if she and Geralt truly love each other, without any magical interference. They find the djinn. They fight it. And when it's defeated, Yennefer traps it and makes her wish. Break the spell. The djinn agrees. The spell is lifted. After the battle, Geralt and Yennefer sit on the shipwreck where they found the djinn. The sorceress admits that she thought breaking the spell would change how she felt about Geralt. But it didn't. She still loves him. She always has. The djinn's magic didn't create her feelings. It just made her doubt them for decades. If the player chooses to reciprocate, Geralt tells her the magic is gone. But nothing has changed for him either. This is the moment that proves what Geralt's original wish actually accomplished. It didn't force Yennefer to love him. It simply bound their fates together, ensured they would keep meeting, keep having chances to choose each other. And in the end, when given the choice free of any magic, they both choose each other anyway. This is perhaps the most important reveal in Geralt's entire story. His wish didn't create their love. It just gave them enough time to discover it was real. Epilogue. The legend lives on, regardless of which ending came to pass. Geralt of Rivia's story became legend. Dandelion wrote ballads that ensured the witcher's deeds would be remembered. In some versions of the story, Geralt found peace. He lived out his remaining years with Yennefer at a vineyard in Toussaint. They spent their days in comfortable domesticity, making wine and love. In other versions, he remained on the path until the day he could hunt no more. And in still other versions, he simply disappeared, leaving behind only stories. But the truth about Geralt of Rivia was this. He was a man created to be a monster hunter, trained to feel nothing, meant to walk alone. And despite all that, he found family. He found love. He found purpose beyond simply taking contracts. He saved the world not because prophecy demanded it, but because the people he loved needed him to try. And in the end, is that not what makes a hero? Not power or destiny or legend, but the choice to stand up when it matters? Geralt never wanted to be a hero. He learned in Blaviken that trying to do the right thing could make you a villain in someone else's story. But he became a hero anyway, through quiet determination and the refusal to abandon the people who mattered to him. His legacy is not just the monsters he killed. His legacy is Ciri. Whether she became an empress or a witcher, or died trying to save the world, she was shaped by the time she spent with him. The continent would remember Geralt of Rivia in different ways. As the Butcher of Blaviken, as the White Wolf, as the Witcher who changed history. But those who truly knew him would remember something simpler. He was a good man in a world that often rewarded cruelty. He was a father who loved his daughter more than his own life. And he was someone who, despite everything, believed that choosing to care was worth the pain it inevitably brought. The witches are dying out. Kaer Morhen stands empty. In a generation or two, witches will be nothing but stories. But stories have power, and as long as people remember Geralt of Rivia, they will remember that even in the darkest times, one person making the right choices can change everything. If these tales have brought you comfort during your rest, please consider subscribing to this channel for more journeys through the worlds of gaming lore. Like this video if you'd like to see more content like this. And may your own path, wherever it leads, be filled with the same courage and compassion that defined Geralt's journey. Until next time, rest well, and may your dreams be filled with gentle adventures.